Husband sent a text to his wife at night. "Hi, honey, I will get late. Please try and wash all my dirty clothes and make sure you prepare my favorite dish before I return." After a while, he sent another text. "And I forgot to tell you that I got an increase in my salary at the end of the month. I'm getting you a new car." She texted back, "Oh my God, really?" Husband replied, "No, I just wanted to make sure you got my first message." An old man was sitting on his porch when a young man walked up with a pad and pencil in his hand. "What are you selling, young man?" he asked. "I'm not selling anything, sir," the young man replied. "I'm the census taker." "A what?" the man asked. "A census taker. We are trying to find out how many people are in the United States." "Well," the man answered, "you're wasting your time with me. I have no idea." A man had just finished reading a new book called "How You Can Be the Man of Your Own Home Again." He stormed into the kitchen and walked directly up to his wife. Pointing a finger in her face, he said sternly, "Firstly, from now on, you need to understand that I am the man of this house, and Simi, accept that what I say goes. Secondly, you will prepare me a gourmet meal tonight, and when I'm finished eating my meal, you will serve me a sumptuous dessert afterward. Then, after dinner, you are going to go upstairs with me to our bedroom, where we will indulge in whatever forms of lovemaking that I choose, no matter what you might have said in the past. After that, you are going to draw me a warm bath so that I can relax. You will wash my back and towel me dry and bring me my robe. Then you will massage my feet and hands. Then after that's done, guess who's going to dress me and comb my hair?" His wife replied, "The funeral director would be my guess." A nun was taking a shower one day, and she heard the doorbell ring. She yelled, "Who is it?" And the person ringing the doorbell yelled, "I'm the blind man." So the nun got out of the shower and wrapped her hair in a towel. She didn't bother putting a towel around herself because the person behind the door was blind. She opened the door and said, "What do you want?" And the man said, "I'm here to check your blinds." Two drunks, Santa and Banta, enter a hotel late at night. They approach the clerk, and Santa says, "Could you please give us a bed with 2 rooms?" "You mean a room with 2 beds?" asks the clerk. Whatever, you shay." So they get a key and somehow manage to stumble upstairs to their room. After fumbling for 10 minutes, they even manage to get their door open. As they stumble inside, the door closes behind them, and they are in total darkness. They go forward slowly, and both fall on the bed closest to the door. "Ah," says Santa, "now we can get some sleep at last." As they try to rearrange themselves, they suddenly realize that they are not alone in their bed. "Hey, there's somebody in my bed," says Banta. "There's somebody in my bed too," says Santa. "Let's get rid of them. We paid for this room, and we're going to sleep in the beds," says Banta. They start a tremendous struggle. They heave and push until eventually, Santa throws Banta on the floor. "All right," Santa shouts, "I've thrown mine off the bed." "You're lucky," says Banta. "I got thrown off and I'm too tired to fight anymore." "Well, never mind," says Santa. "Why don't you just come and share my bed? Let's get some sleep round here." A wife was making a breakfast of fried eggs for her husband. Suddenly, her husband burst into the kitchen. "Careful! Careful! Put in some more butter." "Oh my God! You're cooking too many at once! Too many! Turn them! Turn them now! We need more butter!" "Oh my God! Where are we going to get more butter? They're going to stick! Careful! Careful! I said be careful! You never listen to me when you're cooking! Never! Turn them! Hurry up! Are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? Don't forget to salt them! You know you always forget to salt them! Use the salt! Use the salt! The salt!" The wife stared at him, bewildered. "What in the world is wrong with you? Do you think I don't know how to fry a couple of eggs?" The husband replied calmly, "I just wanted to show you what it feels like when I'm driving." He's now recovering in the hospital. An elderly woman was walking her dog one evening when a young man ran by, grabbed her purse and took off. A couple across the street saw the incident and hurried over to check on her. "Don't worry, we've called the police. They should be here in a few minutes," they reassured her. The woman smiled and said, "It's really no big deal. I carry my old purse to put my dog's poop in until I get home to dispose of it. Imagine the surprise when the thief opens the purse." Two little old ladies were sitting on a park bench outside the local town hall, where a flower show was in progress. The short one leaned over and said, "Life is so boring. We never have any fun anymore. For $10, I'd take my clothes off and streak through that stupid, boring flower show." "You're on," her friend said, holding up a $10 bill. So the old lady fumbled out of her clothes, grabbed a dried rose from a nearby bush, and held it between her teeth. Then, completely she streaked as fast as an old lady can through the front door of the flower show. Waiting outside, her friend soon heard a huge commotion inside the hall, followed by loud applause and shrill whistling. Finally, her smiling friend came through the exit door, surrounded by a cheering, clapping crowd. "What on earth happened?" asked her friend. "I won $100 as first prize for Best Dried Arrangement." In the courtroom, the tension had been building all day as the trial unfolded. The young girl sat in the witness stand. Finally, the moment came when the judge leaned forward, his expression serious but gentle. "Tell us," he said, "Miss, when the alleged assault took place, how did you feel during the incident?" She looked up at the judge and said, "You know, Your Honor, it's funny. I felt a bit like someone who's being forced to eat a sweet. No matter how much they push it on you, it still tastes sweet, doesn't it?" Our teacher asked what my favorite animal was, and I said, "Fried chicken." She said I wasn't funny, but she couldn't have been right, because everyone else laughed. My parents told me to always tell the truth. I did. Fried chicken is my favorite animal. I told my dad what happened, and he said my teacher was probably a member of PETA. He said they love animals very much. I do too, especially chicken, pork, and beef. Anyway, my teacher sent me to the principal's office. I told him what happened, and he laughed too. Then he told me not to do it again. The next day in class, my teacher asked me what my favorite live animal was. I told her it was chicken. She asked me why. So I told her it was because you could make them into fried chicken. She sent me back to the principal's office. He laughed and told me not to do it again. I don't understand. My parents taught me to be honest, but my teacher doesn't like it when I am. Today, my teacher asked me to tell her what famous person I admired most. I told her Colonel Sanders, KFC founder. Guess where I am now? This old lady handed her bank card to the teller and said, "I would like to withdraw $10. The teller told her, "For withdrawals less than $100, please use the ATM." The old lady wanted to know why. The teller returned her bank card and irritably told her, "These are the rules. Please leave if there is no further matter. There is a line of customers behind you." The old lady remained silent for a few seconds, then handed her card back to the teller and said, "Please help me withdraw all the money I have." The teller was astonished when she checked the account balance. She nodded her head, leaned down, and respectfully told her, "You have $300,000 in your account, but the bank doesn't have that much cash currently. Could you make an appointment and come back again tomorrow?" The old lady then asked how much she could withdraw immediately. The teller told her any amount up to $3,000. "Well, please let me have $3,000 now." The teller, very kindly and with a smile, handed $3,000 to her. The old lady put $10 in her purse and asked the teller to deposit $2,990 back into her account. Ha 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 ha. A sweet grandmother telephoned St. Joseph's Hospital. She timidly asked, "Is it possible to speak to someone who can tell me how a patient is doing?" The operator said, "I'll be glad to help, dear. What's the name and room number of the patient?" The grandmother, in her weak, tremulous voice, said, "Norma Findlay, room 302. The operator replied, "Let me put you on hold while I check with the nurses' station for that room." After a few minutes, the operator returned to the phone and said, "I have good news. Her nurse just told me that Norma is doing well. Her blood pressure is fine, her blood work just came back normal, and her physician, Dr. Cohen, has scheduled her to be discharged tomorrow," the grandmother said. "Thank you. That's wonderful. I was so worried. God bless you for the good news." The operator replied, "You're more than welcome. Is Norma your daughter?" The grandmother said, "No, I'm Norma Findlay in room 302. No one tells me." Two married friends are out drinking one night when one turns to the other and says, "You know, I don't know what else to do. Whenever I go home after we've been out drinking, I turn the headlights off before I get to the driveway. I shut off the engine and coast into the garage. Take my shoes off before I go into the house. I sneak up the stairs, get undressed in the bathroom, stick my foot in the toilet, and pee down my leg to prevent splashing sounds. I ease into bed, and my wife still wakes up and yells at me for staying out so late." His friend looks at him and says, "Well, you're obviously taking the wrong approach." I screech into the driveway, slam the door, storm up the steps, pee hard into the toilet water, then use the full flush, throw my shoes in the closet, undress in the bedroom, then jump into bed, slap her on the butt, say, "What's shakin' bacon, wanna mess around?" She always acts like she's sound asleep. Works every time. Late again, the third-grade teacher said to little Johnny. "It ain't my fault, Miss Crabtree," Johnny replied. "You can blame it on my daddy. The reason I'm 3 hours late is that Daddy sleeps without any clothes. Miss Crabtree, who had taught grammar school for over 30 years, was intrigued and a bit alarmed. Despite her years of experience, she decided to ask Johnny what he meant by that. Johnny, known for his mischievous nature but always truthful, began to explain. Well, Miss Crabtree, we've got this pesky coyote at the ranch. The past few nights, it's taken 6 hens and killed Ma's best milk goat. Last night, when Daddy heard a noise in the chicken pen, he grabbed his gun and said to Ma, "That coyote's back again, and I'm going to get him." He told us kids to stay back, but he was as naked as a jaybird. No boots, no pants, no shirt. He crawled to the hen house like a scout on a mission, then poked his double-barrel gun through the window of the coop. Just then, our old black lab, Hudson, woke up and sneaked up behind Daddy. And you know what happened? Hudson stuck his cold nose right in Daddy's... Well, you know. Miss Crabtree, we've been cleaning chickens since 3 o'clock this morning. A guy sitting in a bar is really looking nervous. Every time the door opens, he jumps. Every time there is a noise, he cringes. The bartender, after watching this for an hour, finally goes over and asks, "What's the matter with you?" Well, I received a letter today that said if I didn't stop fooling around with his wife, he was gonna shoot me. For heaven's sake, why don't you just stop fooling around with his wife? Came the reply. I would, but he didn't sign his name. A woman was in bed with her lover when she heard her husband opening the front door. "Hurry," she said, "stand in the corner." She rubbed baby oil all over him, then dusted him with talcum powder. "Don't move until I tell you," she said. "Pretend you're a statue." "What's this?" the husband inquired as he entered the room. "Oh, it's a statue," she replied. "The Smiths bought one, and I liked it, so I got one for us too." No more was said, not even when they went to bed. Around 2 a.m., the husband got up, went to the kitchen, and returned with a sandwich and a beer. "Here, have this." He gives the sandwich and beer to the statue. Then he said to the statue, "I stood like that for 2 days at the Smith's house, and nobody offered me anything." The priest asks, "Is that you, little Joey Pagano?" "Yes, Father, it is." "And who was the girl you were with?" "I can't tell you. Father, I don't want to ruin her reputation." "Well, Joey, I'm sure to find out her name sooner or later, so you may as well tell me now. Was it Tina Minetti?" "I cannot say." "Was it Teresa Mazzarelli?" "I'll never tell." "Was it Nina Capelli?" "I'm sorry, but I cannot name her." "Was it Kathy Piriano?" "My lips are sealed." "Was it Rosa D'Angelo then?" "Please, Father, I cannot tell you." The priest sighs in frustration. "You're very tight-lipped, and I admire that, but you've sinned and have to atone. You cannot be an altar boy now for 4 months. Now you go and behave yourself." Joey walks back to his pew, and his friend Franco slides over and whispers, "What did you get?" 4 months vacation and 5 good leads." An older lady was doing some household chores on a beautiful Sunday morning when she suddenly heard the doorbell ring. She opened the door to see a well-dressed man standing there who said, "Hello, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. Do you have a moment to discuss the Holy Word?" The lady was in a good mood and had just put on a pot of coffee, so she invited the man in and sat down with him at the kitchen table. When she offered him a cup of coffee, she noticed that the man looked a little lost. She asked, "Now, what would you like to talk about, dear?" The young man replied with a pale and shocked face, "Beats the out of me. I've never gotten this far." Blonde woman was speeding down the road and was pulled over by a female police officer who was also a blonde. The blonde cop asked to see the blonde driver's license. She dug through her purse and was getting progressively more agitated. "What does it look like?" she finally asked. The policewoman replied, "It's square, and it has your picture on it." The driver finally found a square mirror in her purse, looked at it, and handed it to the policewoman. "Here it is," she said. The blonde officer looked at the mirror, then handed it back saying, "Okay, you can go. I didn't realize you were a cop." An old farmer drove to a neighbor's and knocked at the door. A boy, about 9, opened the door. The farmer asked, "Is your dad home?" The boy replied, "No, sir, he isn't. He went to town." The farmer said, "Well, is your mother here?" The boy said, "No, sir, she went to town with Dad." The farmer said, "How about your brother Howard? Is he here?" The boy said, "No, sir, he went with Mom and Dad." The rancher stood there for a few minutes, shifting from one foot to the other and mumbling to himself. The boy said, "Is there anything I can do for you? I know where all the tools are if you want to borrow one, or I can give Dad a message." "Well," said the rancher uncomfortably, "I really wanted to talk to your dad. It's about your brother Howard getting my daughter Susie pregnant." The boy thought for a moment. "You would have to talk to Dad about that. I know he charges $500 for the bull and $50 for the hog, but I don't know how much he charges for Howard." A young couple is on their honeymoon. The husband is sitting in the bathroom on the edge of the bathtub, thinking to himself, "Now, how can I tell my wife that I've got really smelly feet and that my socks absolutely stink? I've managed to keep it from her while we were dating, but she's bound to find out sooner or later that my feet stink. Now, how do I tell her?" Meanwhile, the wife is sitting on the bed thinking to herself, "Now, how do I tell my husband that I've got really bad breath? I've been very lucky to keep it from him while we were courting, but as soon as he's lived with me for a week, he's bound to find out. Now, how do I tell him gently?" The husband finally gets up enough courage to tell his wife and walks into the bedroom. He walks over to the bed, climbs over to his wife, puts his arm around her, moves his face very close to hers, and says, "Darling, I've got a confession to make." She says, "So have I, love." To which he replies, "Don't tell me. You've eaten my socks." Two sisters, one blonde and one brunette, inherit the family ranch. Unfortunately, after just a few years, they are in financial trouble. In order to keep the bank from repossessing the ranch, they need to purchase a bull from the stockyard in a far town so that they can breed their own stock. They only have $600 left. Upon leaving, the brunette tells her sister, "When I get there, if I decide to buy the bull, I'll contact you to drive out after me and haul it home." The brunette arrives at the stockyard, inspects the bull, and decides she wants to buy it. The man tells her that he will sell it for $599, no less. After paying him, she drives to the nearest town to send her sister a telegram to tell her the news. She walks into the telegraph office and says, I want to send a telegram to my sister telling her that I've bought a bull for our ranch. I need her to hitch the trailer to our pickup truck and drive out here so we can haul it home. The telegraph operator explains that he'll be glad to help her, then adds, "It's just 99 cents a word." Well, after paying for the bull, the brunette only has $1 left. She realizes that she'll only be able to send her sister one word. After a few minutes of thinking, she nods and says, "I want you to send her one word, comfortable." The operator shakes his head. How is she ever going to know that you want her to hitch the trailer to your pickup truck and drive out here to haul that bull back to your ranch if you send her just the word comfortable? The brunette explains, "My sister's blonde. The word's big. She'll read it very slowly. Comfortable." Marie and her 15-year-old bunch of Cajun girlfriends discussed where to meet for supper. Finally, they agreed to meet at the Dairy Queen, next door to the Bayou View restaurant, because they had only $6 amongst them, and T-Boy Landry, the cute boy in social studies, lived on that street. 10 years later, the group of 25-year-old girlfriends discussed where to meet for supper. Finally, they agreed to meet at the Bayou View restaurant. Because the beer was cheap, the restaurant offered free snacks. The band was good, there was no cover charge, and there were lots of cute guys. 10 years later, the group of 35-year-old Cajun girlfriends discussed where to meet for supper. Finally, they agreed to meet at the Bayou View restaurant. Because the frozen daiquiris were good, it was right near the gym. And if they went late enough, there wouldn't be too many whiny little kids there. 10 years later, the group of 45-year-old girlfriends discussed where to meet for supper. Finally, they agreed to meet at the Bayou View restaurant, because the martinis were big, and the waiters wore tight pants and had nice buns. 10 years later, the group of 55-year-old girlfriends discussed where to meet for supper. Finally, they agreed to meet at the Bayou View restaurant because the prices were reasonable, the wine list was good, the restaurant had windows that opened in case of hot flashes, and they served fish, which is good for your cholesterol. 10 years later, the group of 65-year-old girlfriends discussed where to meet for supper. Finally, they agreed to meet at the Bayou View restaurant because the lighting was good and the restaurant had a senior citizen discount. 10 years later, the group of 75-year-old girlfriends discussed where to meet for supper. Finally, they agreed to meet at the Bayou View restaurant because the food was not too spicy and the restaurant was handicapped accessible. 10 years later, the group of 85-year-old girlfriends discussed where to meet for supper. Finally, they agreed to meet at the Bayou View restaurant because they had never been there before. A blind man walks into a restaurant and sits down. The waiter, who is also the owner, walks up to the blind man and hands him a menu. "I'm sorry, sir, but I am blind and can't read the menu. Just bring me a dirty fork from a previous customer. I'll smell it and order from there." A little confused, the owner walks over to the dirty dish pile and picks up a greasy fork. He returns to the blind man's table and hands it to him. The blind man puts the fork to his nose and takes in a deep breath. "Ah, yes, that's what I'll have. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes." Unbelievable, the owner thinks as he walks towards the kitchen. The cook happens to be the owner's wife. He tells her what had just happened. The blind man eats his meal and leaves. Several days later, the blind man returns, and the owner mistakenly brings him a menu again. "Sir, remember me? I'm the blind man." "I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you. I'll go get you a dirty fork." The owner retrieves a dirty fork and brings it to the blind man. After another deep breath, the blind man says, "That smells great. I'll take the macaroni and cheese with broccoli." Walking away in disbelief, the owner thinks the blind man is screwing around with him and tells his wife that the next time the blind man comes in, he's going to test him. The blind man eats and leaves. He returns the following week, but this time the owner sees him coming and runs to the kitchen. He tells his wife, "Mary, rub this fork on your panties before I take it to the blind man." Mary complies and hands her husband the fork. As the blind man walks in and sits down, the owner is ready and waiting. "Good afternoon, sir. This time I remembered you, and I already have the fork ready for you." The blind man puts the fork to his nose, takes a deep whiff, and says, "Hey, I didn't know that Mary worked here.